Okay, so today I'm joined by Ivaxi. Um, Ivaxi is going to share a bit about her journey from her studies as an electrical engineering student, and later on as a PhD student as well. Ivaxi, hi. Um,
Hey.
yeah, thanks for joining us. So yeah, it'd be great if you could kind of give a bit of a brief overview about your path up to now, like right from your A levels, like what subjects you decided to do, and then kind of a bit about the subsequent steps as well. Then I will kind of go into some of the details.
Thanks for having me. So I studied my undergrad at Imperial. I did electrical and electronic engineering, but before that, I actually moved from UAE. So I didn't have the classic UK A levels. I actually went through Indian education system, where I did all three sciences, maths and English was compulsory. So yeah, basically I did all the sciences. Compared to A levels, I think the Indian system is less flexible. So I had an option to either do all three sciences or do computer science with maths and physics and chemistry. I chose to do biology just because it seemed like I could potentially learn computer science later in the future, or I was going to do that anyway. So I wanted to gain more knowledge. And choosing biology, which I may not have used since then. Just seemed like a more interesting choice. So just as that, applied to Imperial, got in, I decided to do electrical and electronic engineering. After studying, I spent a couple of years in industry, academia, realized I want to get back into academia. So I'm currently a PhD student. But specifically right now, I'm a student researcher, which is a research internship at Google DeepMind, working on Gemini models. Yeah, that's kind of my short journey.
Cool. Um, okay, so I guess at the kind of during your studies prior to kind of deciding what you wanted to do at university, and I guess um, also so the system you did during I guess you could say pre-university, like the pre-university preparation stage. So it sounds like there was a science track, like you had to pick like a science track or maybe like a
Mhm.
humanities track, something like that. Is that
Yeah, exactly.
right?
Or like economics or something, but non-science. Yeah.
Right. So what were some of the things that kind of led you to decide that actually you wanted to pursue a science track?
Mhm. I think it was just my interest in mathematics. I really like doing maths. When I was young, until equivalent of GCSE level, um, liked maths, liked chemistry, also liked physics. So it just seemed like an obvious option for me to go down. I actually thought earlier that I would end up doing mathematics at university, but yeah, I wanted to do something a bit less abstract. And something that I can actually build things and be able to actually debug things or work through a problem in real world. So I decided to do electrical and electronic engineering. But I really like the subject really, so sure, I'll just continue doing that into my A-level studies.
Um, when you started your degree, I guess, especially in your first year of studies, were there certain things which you could say maybe you didn't expect, that you were perhaps surprised by? Um,
I think actually So because I didn't come from the UK system, I'm not sure how would a student who comes to the UK system find it. But at least for us, we had a bit less intuition. So it was still intuition-based mathematics, but a bit less graphical-based mathematics that I did in my school. And at least at Imperial, it was quite important to understand the intuition using graphs or graphical methods. So that was something that I had to learn myself, which is obviously more useful. But I suppose I didn't. Yeah, it's just not something I would have foreseen. More specifically, talking from individual subject perspective.
Right, right, fair enough. Okay, cool. And I think during your studies you did some internships, and you did also spent time like providing I don't know well like providing guidance basically to the early stage undergraduate students as well, right?
Yeah, so during my undergrad, so I did obviously triple E at Imperial, and I did an MEng program, which was basically bachelor's and integrate master's. And I mainly, I wouldn't say actively give advice in terms of, it was not a formalized thing if some of the juniors would ask for suggestions or kind of like if there were different subjects to choose. So I would just give them informal advice. It was never really formalized.
So
Per se.
yeah, so what I actually meant was, as I used it, like so I think you did some undergraduate teaching assistant stuff, right? So I think
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
like I think oftentimes that was like either whether it's labs or is it something this
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
thing.
So it was first year lab. So when I was in third and fourth year, I did ETA for first year labs. Really, it was like the initial part of triple E where you're working through what back then seemed like basic problems to me. Obviously, I don't think I can do them anymore. But just working through like I remember we had this competition of making e-bug, that's what we call it, but it was like a robotics challenge, or just looking through scopes and yeah, different projects.
Was there anything you noticed when it came to actually some of the more well-prepared students versus I would say maybe less prepared students for
Mhm.
labs? Was there any kind of differences you noticed? And I guess any pointers that you have in that regard for yeah.
I think in general for university, also applicable for labs, is to ask questions. Um, it's really important. We often think that this topic, we've gone over this topic in lectures, for example, I might be too stupid to ask, but often labs may not follow one-to-one pattern or exactly what you're studying in the lecture. So there may be some things that you've missed, and it's okay to just ask why um, about some hypotheses, right? Or if you don't understand, I think asking for help is really important because it would just teach you. So something that I would see, like as you said, more prepared students would be they would be open to asking for questions and listening to them, engaging into discussions as compared to the less prepared ones, because they would feel that they are less prepared and they would just not ask any questions. They may even fall behind on the project or on the lab work because they haven't really understood. So I think asking for questions, asking for help is completely normal. And that's exactly why the GTAs and the UTAs, the teaching assistants, are there for. So please do ask questions.
Cool. One of the things I noticed when I was looking at your kind of professional, well, when I say professional, I mean including basically things you did alongside your undergraduate studies, like, internships and stuff like that, is that quite a number of the things you focused on are in the present have become a lot more relevant, in the sense of like, I think there was at an early stage you did an internship in, I think it was in India, which involved looking at FPGAs, and then later on there was some kind of I think it's like deep learning related research or something like that, as part of an internship. But this was at stages which were quite, basically before the whole the events of 2020, late 2022, and all of that stuff that happened, which I don't know, there's this kind of almost this forward thinking kind of almost seeing where the football is going before it gets there, kind of thing. So what would you say maybe influenced that, and also what were those some of those experiences like as well?
So I think you first mentioned my internship in India, so when I went doing electrical and electronic engineering, I wanted to experience both, because they're quite different, right? Electrical engineering is probably more focused on transformers and like larger things, as compared to electronics is like more micro devices, or smaller things that happen in digital electronics. So I did my first internship at the end of my first year on electrical engineering. Great experience. This was Bombardier, so I think even the tubes in London are built by this company that actually builds like train carriages or tube carriages, basically, across the world. And that's exactly what I worked on, looking at their heating systems. How can we optimize the electricals in their different systems? It was great fun. But then I realized that maybe in second year I would get the opportunity to explore electronics sides of things. So I did my second internship at the end of my second year, which was in an electronic-based company called Imagination Technologies. So their claim to fame was they used to do the GPUs for Apple until Apple started doing their own. So this is the GPUs in iPhones, basically. So I worked there. Also enjoyed it. I was working on memory systems and caching, and kind of reducing the cache load or optimizing the cache. That was great. I did enjoy it. Between that as well, just before my second year ended, so before this internship, I also did 2 Spring Insights. One was at Credit Suisse, the other one was at Goldman Sachs. Both great experiences as well. But then that's exactly when I was exposed to more data analysis sort of aspect. And I realized that we have so much data, right? But you can analyze this data, but can you leverage this data to actually make either our lives useful or gain some interesting insights? So at the end of second year, going into my third year, it was still a buzzword around us. Like everyone wanted to do like machine learning. And I wanted to obviously understand what machine learning was. I'd gain some knowledge through internships, mainly at the banks, because it was like a software internship.
Yes.
The third year
So
is basically when,
on the
yeah,
banks,
yeah.
so you by that stage you've kind of got experience of a bit more like, I guess, technology in the context of a more tech, a kind of like a tech company, but then also
Mhm.
technology within a bank. And I mean, my observation was that after that, you kind of a lot of your focus was more so tech within tech companies. So
Mhm.
was there anything you observed during your time where it was because I've seen sometimes some people did tech within banks and then decided after this that they actually wanted to do tech within tech. Um, what was your experience that in that particular regard? Is there anything that kind of led you to think actually I kind of prefer tech within tech for now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so my experiences were great. We did some rotations, shadowing. So this is for, I'm speaking for both the Spring Internships, Credit Suisse and Goldman Sachs. Both were great experiences. I also did kind of shadowing for an machine learning engineer, which I thought was the most interesting actually, and which kind of motivated me to think about it a bit more. And the choice of tech within tech was just, I just wanted to go where there is most innovation and where I could learn the most. And I know I could learn greatly in a bank as well. But from what I've learned is that the internships are quite structured and I wanted to just learn a bit more and I actually wanted to do more research. So my third internship, which was also kind of like the placement that Imperial EEE offers, we have the opportunity to do 6-month placements. Um, that is something that I was actively looking for AI research opportunities or machine learning research opportunities. Um, and back then, at least, I think they may offer it now to undergrads, but at least back then they would just offer it to PhDs,
Yeah.
interns or otherwise, or someone at like higher degree level.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was not as common. The more common route was obviously software engineering, and then you could do like a machine learning, but you weren't particularly guaranteed. And I wanted to actively, I got really interested in machine learning, seemed really, first, really cool. So I thought, okay, I want to do this really cool thing that all the smart people are also doing. So maybe I want to try and get my hands onto that. But just in general, there could be so much value added potentially with machine learning. Um, so I started exploring that. And by like mid third year, I was very sure that I wanted to get more experience and do probably more research-esque things so that I'm working on like the cutting edge part of technology for then.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Um, and later on, you did well. I guess you're currently doing your PhD. What some of the things that kind of I think you have touched on it briefly earlier on, but that kind of made you decide actually I don't want to go straight into just full-time industry straight after my undergraduate. I actually want to do more research.
Mhm.
And then also, what led you to decide to do a position like kind of I guess in a different country
Mhm.
as well? Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I did end up going to industry right after my degree. So I did an internship between my third and fourth year, as I mentioned, Imagination Technologies, did a research internship, enjoyed it. We ended up getting a patent out of that internship, so that was really cool, really exciting. For me, for like a 19, 20-year-old me, I was extremely excited about the possibility of getting the patent, or basically contributing towards something that actually holds value to the world, or at least that company.
Yep.
And that was really exciting. I decided to come back to the company after graduating. I graduated in COVID, but I mean, I still came back to the company, and most of the people in my team were, if not all, no, most of the people were actually PhD graduates that I was working with, really. They were always talking about their PhD life and, like things that they got to work on during their PhDs, and just while continuing working on our product. And I actually really enjoyed working there. But then at some point, I got a bit interested into sort of AI safety and just interpretability. I realized
Sorry,
that
AI safety and what, sorry?
interpretability, so
Okay.
AI to interpret AI and decision making.
Right.
So I got really interested into that, and back then, the only place, like industry is great, but often when you would like to have your own flexibility to explore any topic that you like, whether it brings in money or it doesn't, right? That kind of freedom is something that you can only get in academia. Also, everyone around me were PhDs, so it just seemed like, maybe this is the right opportunity. And I'd lived in the UK for about 5, 6 years by then. I thought, you know what, maybe I want to explore a new country, do research elsewhere. So I actually moved to Canada, went to Montreal, went to Mila, which is the lab headed by Joshua Bengio. I think he's one of the Turing award winners, along with Jan LeCun and Jeffrey Hinton, of course. So went to Mila to do just like an academic research position for a year or so. I liked it. I really liked research. I learned a lot, and I really liked research, but then I also wanted to do research back in Europe. And yeah, I found CISPA. So most of the PhD is based on your match with your supervisor, and I really liked my supervisor's profile and the kind of research he does and his openness to new ideas and kind of exploring new topics. And that's exactly what I want to do. I wanted to explore many different topics that I find interesting during my PhD. And I'd say I've gotten the opportunity to literally explore everything I wanted, which I'm very grateful for. But yeah, that kind of, I moved a bit, and now at the moment I've just moved to Zurich for Google DeepMind, but otherwise I'm based in Germany.
Yeah, so during your time at and also, yeah, thanks for the clarification, because I guess I kind of glossed over the fact that you did some full-time researcher roles afterwards, just before you actually started so when you were at Mila, what were some of the areas of research that you found most interesting, and what was, I guess, part of what influenced, why do you feel perhaps you found those particular areas most interesting as well? Yeah.
So I was at Mila from early 2022 to mid 2023, and ChatGPT was released in end of December 2022, right? So this is still pre-ChatGPT era. So at least at Mila, everyone was either working on Usefulness or was working on reinforcement learning. There were very few people working on interpretability. Now there are actually a lot more, or explainability. And one of the aspects of kind of AI safety or ethical AI is to be able to explain its decision making, right? So if you use AI for job, for shortlisting job, like applicants for a particular job, you want to make sure that it's not just picking out random applicants without any explanations. So I also looked at fairness, biases, but also mainly focused on explainability. So whether you can explain AI's decision or can we improve explainability of machine learning models, explainability. And then actually, obviously, the area of AI safety was becoming quite relevant. And eventually, yeah, that was December 2022, ChatGPT happened, and I guess then many people kind of shifted to working on language models. And I think when I was leaving, more and more people were working on safety.
Yeah, so yeah, as you said, it's kind of during that period of time when you're working there, you kind of have that I don't know, the ChatGPT moment kind of in the middle. The shift from that you observe some people kind of shifting to that different area,
Mhm.
was that a sudden shift? Was that how was that observed? Like what could you? I don't know if you could go into a bit more detail about what you observed as far as, and also I guess, were people excited? Like how excited is I guess.
Mhm. Yeah, so I think people were extremely excited. Um, I remember speaking to some people, and this was like pre-ChatGPT, right? Who had said, so we obviously part of PhD or any kind of academic research is also writing papers. And there was a paper that said their abstract was written by a language model. This was pre-ChatGPT, right? We're just using GPT-2 or something,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
3. But that was wild. That felt crazy. And then to have ChatGPT, I think everyone is really excited by the potential. Um, but also they realized that some of the research that they were doing might have to be pivoted. And so did I. I pivoted a bit as well, just because I wanted to work. If you want to work on very topical things, something that industry works on, um, and the rest of the world were adopting basically, then and if you want research to be at the forefront of kind of anything that's any new innovation, then you have to kind of keep up with the innovation, and adopt that. So I think it was quite a natural shift. I don't think anyone kind of like dropped all their ideas or all their projects and they're like, okay, from tomorrow I'm working on ChatGPT. At least that's not what I saw. But there was a very natural and gradual shift of thinking of problems from the perspective of a general purpose AI model or a large language model, and then eventually a vision language model as well. So I think there is a natural shift. Obviously, at some point, some people were quite scared of like if AI can do everything, which it couldn't, which it still can't. Um, what kind of topic do we work on? Because earlier people used to work on translation, and now then ChatGPT was pretty decent at translation, right? So it is easy to get overwhelmed and kind of think that there are no research ideas or research projects that they could work on. But I think everyone found their way and realized actually it doesn't work as well. There are still plenty of things to do to kind of improve just general purpose AI models or even domain specific AI models.
Um, so when you've got experience doing research within more of a commercial enterprise, and then also you know, of course research that kind of a lot of commercial relevance, but within more of a academic institution. Was there any how can I say, when you first got exposed to more of the industry kind of version of what approaching research was like, was there any kind of shift that you noticed, and also kind of going from having that perspective and doing research within an academic context. What was that? What was that general? What was that like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess for context, I have done research at Amazon and currently at Google DeepMind. So something that these internships have helped me is to actually structure the problem in a way that is actually relevant for the business. Because often as academics, you're just interested to work on interesting problems, and that's fine. But what industry needs is actually solutions, right? It wants, obviously, you to work on interesting problems, but also have a solution. You can't just have a negative result paper and be, because that doesn't help the business. You need to think from what kind of research can make most impact onto, I guess, any of their products. Or if not an immediate impact, but at least one could foresee an impact instead of kind of working on completely abstract problems. But I'm sure there may be teams that work on abstract problems in these companies, but I actually learned this, and I actually really value this because now in my research project that I work on, I want to know what is the true motivation. So I also supervise a lot of students at the moment, and they come up with really interesting ideas. But then what is the value that we're adding to even the research community, right? Because if it's just an interesting problem without adding any value, we need to motivate it well enough. What's the aim, you know? So I think that it's helped me think in slightly better way. So I quite value that.
It's what? Sorry, it's. Do you
It's
say?
helped me think
Oh, okay. Cool.
in a slightly different way.
Right. Cool. Yeah, so I guess one of the other roles you did recently was as you mentioned, the Amazon, um, what was that experience like in terms of the research? What were some of the kind of research areas you were focused on during that as well?
Mm-hmm. So I was an applied scientist, again, research internship at Amazon. I was particularly part of the team that works on globalization or of a particular problem, or so for example, most of the features that are released for a particular company may be released in English, right? Depending upon the company, but for Amazon, most of the products or features are released in English. How can we transfer these features into newer languages, into European countries, right? Where you may have cultural nuances added in the language. So I worked in the multilinguality and LLM-Judge team. So what a language model as a judge does is it evaluates the responsive language model. So earlier we had more classical matrices that were used to evaluate a language model's response, but now the responses are so great and so coherent that we require another human to evaluate them, but obviously we don't have the time to evaluate every response of a language model. So another language model oversees and judges what another language model is generating, right?
Right.
And I was looking at how can we improve LLM as a judge beyond English, because most of the evaluations have been done on English, and how can we improve language models as a judge for obviously European languages, but also low resource non-European languages as well.
Right. Right. Yeah. That sounds quite involved. It's quite meta, almost like it's like you've got this kind of okay. This
Yeah, the data sets are actually called meta eval data sets. So
right,
yeah.
right, right. Um, okay, yeah. So um, I think earlier on there was what was it? It was you did a role which was like health. Was it um kind of a health research
Mhm. Yeah,
role?
in Canada, during my
Yeah,
time in
yeah.
Canada.
What was like and um actually this so previously you'd mentioned deciding to study biology as part of your sorry, what's the qualification called? The
It's called
pre-university
CBSE, but it's
CBS
SE.
CBSE.
Yeah,
Okay, what does that stand for?
Central Board of Secondary Education
Okay, okay,
of
cool.
India, I suppose. But yeah.
Yeah, okay, right. Yeah, so and when you mentioned that, I was obviously my thought was about how, of course, some of these very bleeding edge, very frontier kind of AI applications do focus on things that have some level of relevance to biology, whether it's protein folding or things of that nature, right? Where
Mhm.
someone who has a bit of that kind of background can perhaps have more of an appreciation for how it can be, how that is actually quite a rich area as a target for AI applications, right? Although, I mean, I don't know what the health internship was focused on, but maybe you could give me a bit of an idea about what that was focused on and how the AI kind of came into that and the
Mhm.
research that came into that.
Yeah, I actually thought that my biology was useless, but it wasn't. Yeah, I think I remember actually having conversations. So this was with a company that was also kind of like, yeah, it was part of the Mila ecosystem essentially. And I was working on medical images. Some people were working also on genomics, which is kind of like the thing that you were talking about. But some people, so when people were talking about genomics, if I didn't have the background, I obviously wouldn't understand much. But I was able to catch up, and I particularly worked on just medical imaging. And so, for example, like X-rays and looking at improving um, or CT scans and predicting kind of like brain lesions, potentially cancer, segmentation of different parts of the brain. And something that is, I think, quite interesting that people were working back then and just in general is multimodality, where you have information from different modalities. For example, if I'm a patient, they may do the entire CT scan, but they may also do my blood work, which would be data in form of tabular data, right? But also they'll have images about me. And then if they do some like genomic tests, then they'll have genomics uh, data about me. So they have data from different modalities and how do you actually fuse those modalities? So to understand the discussions, I was involved in the discussions. I didn't actively really work on that. But during that time, I think, yeah, I was able to catch the nuances better because of my background. And I actually even recently worked on a project on gene regulatory networks. Also kind of required some biological, but we always partner with because we're not still we're not the domain experts. I'm not the domain expert for genomics. We always partner with the genomic or relevant experts But what makes it easier is to have, if you know the language that they're speaking, then it's easier to communicate between the two kind of researchers. So that probably helped.
Yeah. Yeah, because it can be a bit of what could we call it? If you don't have at least some sort of prior appreciation for some aspects, the kind of intellectual, there could be a bit of like an intellectual obstacle there where you have to actually invest time
Mm-hmm.
to get the basics when you actually want to work on creating a new frontier, right? So yeah, so having at least some basic stuff, and then of course having an expert, you get that opportunity to be aware of the nuances, which would not be obvious for someone who's not spent kind of that day in day out looking at that area. Yeah, yeah. The One of the things I was so that's probably quite an interesting area as far as the legal this kind of the legal side, and then obviously that was in Canada, but even in the UK there's a lot of discussion about well, I guess we don't need to go into too much detail about it, but like the whole legal frameworks and the questions about patient data and how is it being used, and our patients actually, they may get a benefit if this stuff is researched, but then do they actually want their data to be put into these, I attended this law conference where that was one of the discussions about,
Mm-hmm.
where's do you want the data to go to these organizations, kind of thing. So that's definitely a very interesting area. Yeah. So did you have conversations during some of your research about more of the all of these ethical questions that sometimes have to
Mm-hmm.
be asked about, well, what this is quite cool, this is quite interesting, but what are we actually doing here, and is this actually, so yeah, maybe you could yeah
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of people in actually my PhD team work on privacy, and some people actually work on genomics privacy more specifically as well. And one of the projects, the genomics project that I was talking about, was actually in collaboration with the German neurogenerative kind of research institute as well. So it's based in Europe, where also my supervisor was leading this like EU consortium, which had people from obviously different universities, but also like lawyers, people from Alan Turing, and other privacy researchers across everywhere. And I think everyone's quite concerned about, and everyone takes, again, I'm not sure what happens and how does NHS process the data, obviously, and I don't want to assume anything, but at least in research, our project actually with genomics was to generate synthetic data. So there was data from Alzheimer's patients, and obviously this data is very useful to have personalized healthcare options for those patients, or develop new medical insights, but we don't want to give the patient information. So is there a way that you can mathematically guarantee that this patient's information is private? There are methods to do that.
Yeah.
It's called differential privacy, where you can mathematically guarantee that this person or any person's data is confidential, right? You can't go back to that person. You can't identify that person. So that was one of the project, which was to exactly generate the synthetic data so that researchers can then use it. I think this is quite an important topic, especially for sensitive applications such as medical, but also law, I think, is quite important. So yeah, we had lots of discussions around privacy, and I would consider these as part of ethical AI. We'd also written a recent position paper on how causality can help with like different pillars of ethical or trustworthy AI, where we consider fairness, accuracy, robustness, privacy. But I'm also thinking about the other aspect of AI safety, which is from X risk, which is like the existential risk to humans, even if there's the tiniest risk, right? You want to make sure that AI doesn't deceive humans.
Yeah,
And we've
yeah,
got a grant from Coefficient Giving, or formerly Open Philanthropy, for exactly this, uh, to see when the language models or AI is actually deceiving humans. Um, yeah, so I've been thinking about both the aspects. One is the ethical and the other is like X-risk.
yeah. I guess within that there's the whole consideration of not just whether it's intentionally trying to deceive someone, but whether it's overconfident in something that's wrong as well, right? So,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah. When you mentioned that, I was just thinking about like, James Cameron movies and, Terminator and all of this stuff. Any, yeah, yeah, yeah. So, okay. So one of the other things I was very curious about was during your time as a PhD student, you've done quite a bit of participated in publishable research and actually I've got your name on a number of research papers, right? For some PhD students, some of them they go through the whole process. They don't do maybe even one paper. And you've done quite a number of you've got quite a number of like you've contributed to a number of papers. What was some of the things that perhaps as far as your own decision making and also you could say on the environmental side like kind of the institution or whatever whereby you were either you say able to or had the confidence to say what I actually want to participate in what would be publishable research. And what was that process like for you in terms of the first paper, and then I guess currently where you've got a few quite a number of papers you've contributed to. Yeah. So I don't know if you could give a bit of an insight into that.
I would begin by saying every domain, also in computer science and just in engineering or otherwise, every domain has very different rates at which people do publications. I know people from other engineering domains, and um, the expectation out of the PhD is different. So is kind of the timescales that people are working with. Um, because currently when we're working with AI, obviously the timescales are really narrow in terms of like what are interesting topics, because things are changing so fast.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
even before that, I think so. I wouldn't I wouldn't negatively rate someone if they don't have a publication just because I think they just come from such different domains. Like if you come from a really theoretical um, domain, you may max have like one paper out of your PhD. Two is great. Um, so it's quite different for different domains. Having said that, I think I've actually gotten great advices from people and great mentorship um, early on in my career because I've been doing this for almost 8 to 10 years, not 10, about 8 years or so doing AI for 8 years. I have picked up on certain nuances on how to conduct research. Obviously, things still go wrong. but that's just how research is, right? Like you're learning from just doing. One of the biggest things that someone told me is 80% of your projects that you think of would fail. Because obviously research is not a straight line, right? Like you really need great mentorship to be able to get to the final project until you've obviously become an independent thinker. So early on, for example, my first paper was based on like my thesis, and then I just like written it to a workshop at CVPR. CVPR is like the top, one of the top conferences. Like even on Google Scholar rating, if we see, it's ranked higher than Nature. So, but it was a workshop at CVPR. I submitted
so computer vision
and pattern recognition.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, but then the year after I went to CVPR where I was actually organizing Women in Computer Vision workshop.
Did you say women in computer vision?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I organized Women in Computer Vision for 2 years in a row at CVPR, which is the biggest kind of like vision conference, or yeah, it is one of the biggest conferences that happens every year. And yeah, great mentorship. Obviously did some things right. It's really important to pick your motivation for the project and why should people care about this problem, and what do you want to what else do you want to communicate? Because half of the research is actually about doing the research. The other half is how to write the paper. And even if you have fantastic results, if the paper is not well written, it's not going to get in. It may not get in, right? So writing paper is extremely important. And to write in an academic style, not over obfuscating, and just writing in the academic style is really important. And this is something that is really hard for people when they first get into research, because they're like, okay, I want to start doing experiments. Now you have access to coding agents as well, so they can kind of accelerate on doing experiments. But often, so I mentor a lot actually. And within this, I realized that writing is often the biggest kind of like, that requires a lot of brain power as well, which people may not have, I suppose, predicted when they start, right? Like it's all about doing research, but like it's not just research, it's how you communicate your research.
Yeah.
Because eventually you want others to actually read it and make inferences and build upon it. But if no one can really understand what you've done and why have you selected a particular hyperparameter or selected a particular methodology, no one's going to use it. So selling your story for researchers is quite important as well.
Right. One of the things why I was smiling was that you said that 2 papers is great, and when I was looking through your papers, I was like, it doesn't even fit on 1 page. I have to go to 2 pages to see all of the papers. So yeah. So I think that's quite so what are some of the things that you've recently worked on, that you've published, and what were those specific processes like for you?
Mm-hmm. So more recently, I've been thinking about memory and language models having this aspect. So earlier, language models were kind of like stateless. So you have a conversation, you open up a new conversation, and then it has no context about you from previous conversations, right? But then it can be quite annoying to tell the language model that your name is David, you're based in the UK, this is what you do, and just basics, these are your preferences, just basic things about you, right? You don't want to repeat information about you again and again. So it'd be great to have some kind of information flow from one session to the other session. Now, this is great. Almost every conversational assistant, consider it like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, every assistant has the concept of memory where they store key facts and preferences, like user preferences and beliefs, so that the language model can personalize the answer. So for example, if I'd probably mentioned that I'm vegan, and in a new conversation, I asked for recipes with some aubergine that I've left over in my fridge, right? I don't want it to give me aubergine with like fish or chicken. Because I don't want to be telling it every time again and again that my food preferences are vegan. So if it just stores this information, it means I don't have to repeat myself. And it makes the user language model interaction a lot more seamless. However, during this, I observed that there's some kind of like leakage from irrelevant conversations into my conversation. And yeah, so it just ended up formalizing this and worked on. So a lot of my current research is actually based on what I've observed from my interactions and how can we improve or look at safety from those perspectives. Also, some of the work has been kind of like foreseeing in future. One of the works that we presented at ICML in South Korea was on open-ended agents. So these are the agents which are self-improving without human in the loop. So at the moment, you may imagine that something like Copilot, you still give the language model some instructions and guide the language model to perform a particular task. For open-ended agents, you don't give any instructions. There is no goal. It is just improving. It's creating problems, improving, and that has many safety implications, which no one had actually thought about earlier. So we formalized that into, like we taxonomized and formalized that into a paper, which was presented at ICML, another top 3 machine learning conferences, which this year happened in South Korea.
I've heard of ICML. I don't know what it stands for though.
International Machine Learning.
Okay, International Conference on Machine Learning. Okay,
So
cool.
in machine learning, there are top 3 conferences: NeurIPS, ICML, ICLR, which is ICLR.
Right.
For NLP, which is language processing. So machine learning conferences include AI, computer vision, robotics. It's kind of like lots of topics, but you have more specialized conferences for language models as well, which is like ACL, EMNLP, and NACL. And then for computer vision, you have CVPR, ICCD. I feel like I'm just saying jargons, but it's just if it rings bells to anyone. But these are quite popular top conferences where now it's really hard to even get like tickets to.
Right.
It's become like a Taylor Swift concert to get tickets to these conferences. Unless you have an accepted paper, then your ticket is guaranteed. Obviously.
Right. So NeurIPS, that's Neural Information Processing Systems Conference. Okay. Now, when you started your PhD, you already had basically research experience in, you had industry research experience full time. But I'm sure there's cases where you've seen where people are starting their PhDs and they don't quite have that body of past research experience to that extent. What are some things that maybe observations and also What is some advice that you've perhaps maybe given to those early stage PhD students that they found useful, or just based on your observations, what you think if they knew this, that might be actually useful to them, to actually get their bearings a bit faster in that context?
Mhm. I would say when you're just starting off, and this is not just like a PhD, right? When you're even like starting off any new project in a slightly different topic, which is not your domain expertise, read plenty. I think it's really important to understand where the current literature is. And it is especially important right now because the field is moving so fast. You don't want to innovate something and realize actually 3 months down the lane that someone actually already worked on this like a year ago. So it's really important to know where the literature stands on the sets of problems and problem statements that exist. But counter to that, I think there should be a limit to where you stop reading. It's really important to just start doing experiments. And while doing experiments, you naturally come up with so many problems that exist with certain assumptions of a particular work or hypotheses which may not work under like different types of data. So I would definitely suggest to spend some time reading. But if you still feel like you haven't gotten like your eureka moment or that kind of like incredible idea that you want to work on, just start working on a relevant paper or start reproducing their results, working on the code base, and I'm sure you can come up with plenty of problems that exist. So getting your hands dirty into the problem is actually what would help you kind of potentially come up with your first problem statement.
Right. Now, one of the things I've observed, and this is really looking at from a framework of people who just finished their like pre-university qualifications, they're just about to start a degree, is that quite a number of people who actually choose to do computer science and computing type of degrees, perhaps even also electrical engineering type of degree, is many of them actually they haven't done an A level in computing, right? Prior to actually starting their degrees. Of course, in almost all cases, they've got some sort of mathematics qualification, sometimes even further maths, sometimes even additional further maths as well, right? So, but not necessarily computing. And you know, some students would have found that useful, right? But obviously, it's not necessarily mandatory. Where I'm getting at is more not necessarily about the qualification, but more so the coding aspect of a lot of
Mm-hmm.
research. When you're doing research, it can be valuable to know how to code, to be at least familiar with that process, that way of thinking as well. Are there any particular languages that you'd recommend to, for example, A-level students or even early stage undergraduates that they might in their spare time want to get at least reasonably familiar with? Yeah.
I would say nowadays people code in natural language. Um, Very few. I think it's really important to pick out bugs, and for that, it's really important to know the language. But otherwise, I think most of the people use coding agents, right? So to know specific details of the language is not particularly important. I think the most important is just to have like a logical thinking brain. I mean, expertise. Other thing is learning how to use AI is quite important. How to leverage AI. What are the limitations of AI? Because I feel like everyone now would just be like, oh, I'm going to ask AI to write the code. Sure, you can do that, but you want to obviously also understand and the caveats, the potential gaps, right? So I think knowing that is quite important. But otherwise, like for something like AI, everything is Obviously, unless you go low level, it's coded in C++ or other languages, but at the moment, more higher level research that I do is all in Python.
Right.
But I think for students who have the summer break, well, probably almost finishing, but who have the summer break before they start uni, I would suggest maybe spend some time who want to go into like AI, want to do computer science, do AI. I would suggest them probably start thinking about learning how to use AI and also probably do some kind of like research programs or kind of getting your hands onto research for AI because that is exactly what's going to set them apart from their peers, right? To be able to think in a way that a researcher would. So you're already like a few steps ahead of everyone else. And that would be the most important skill given like coding, the current coding models are really good. So what would be the most important is how you can think. And research gives you the ability to formulate a problem well. And I think if they get the opportunity to, I'd suggest try to do some kind of research program or just research in their own time, really.
Right. Cool. And recently you started a role as a researcher, right? As a Google DeepMind. What were some of the things that attracted you to like decide actually this is quite an interesting company as far as I would actually be interested in doing some work there?
Mhm. It sounds like you're almost from Google DeepMind and you're asking, why do you want to work at this
Oh, no, no,
company?
no, no.
No, no. But I think they were working on exactly. I'm currently working in a really exciting team. The research agenda or um, is very similar to what I am currently working on, personalization and memory. So it's very, very relevant to my current research. Great team. Also, I'd like to get experience on working on one of these current models that have incredible capabilities. So yeah, I just wanted to be hopefully contributing to one of these you know, general purpose models.
Right. Cool. Um, yeah, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add or that's kind of those are my questions and stuff.
Mhm. No, yeah, very, very comprehensive conversation.
Okay, cool. Well, I mean, I appreciate you taking the time to kind of share from your extensive insights and experience. Um, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for
Thanks.
having me.